being a horror streamer is, most of the time, a dream. I have thousands of followers who tune in every time I go live, waiting to see me scream, laugh, or just interact while I explore the scariest games the market has to offer. The notifications of new followers and the chat messages keep popping up, which, to me, is a clear sign that I'm doing something right. My reputation grew quickly, and part of that is due to the way I react to the games. People say it's genuine, like I'm really living through the horrors that appear on the screen. Maybe that's it, or maybe it's my ability to make everyone feel like we're experiencing it together. Interacting with the chat during lives is one of my favorite parts. That's where the real show happens. I always try to keep a direct connection with my fans, answering questions, reading the funniest comments, or even sharing tips and theories about the game. That contact makes me feel close to those on the other side of the screen, even though, in reality, I don't know any of them personally. Each live is a new opportunity to create memorable moments, whether it's a jump scare that makes everyone leap, or a joke that hits just at the right time. Off camera, however, I'm a much more discreet guy. Little is known about my personal life, and I make a point of keeping it that way. Most of my followers have no idea where I live, who I talk to, or what I do outside of live streaming hours. It's a balance I've found to preserve a bit of my sanity. The internet can be an unpredictable place, and the last thing I want is for my private life to blend with this chaotic world of online entertainment. I live alone in an apartment that isn't very big, but it's comfortable enough for me. The place is my refuge, my sanctuary, where I can turn off the cameras, relax, and stop being the guy from the streams for a while. It's where I can walk barefoot, leave the dishes in the sink longer than I should, and watch movies without thinking about engagement or views. But even though I don't broadcast this part of my life, the feeling of being watched never completely goes away. It's part of the job, I guess. The life I've built online is as brilliant as it is terrifying, but I've always known how to control the balance. At least, until now. It all started like any other day. I was in the middle of a stream, playing a new horror game that the chat had been asking for weeks. About halfway through the live, between one scare and another, I noticed a familiar name in the chat, Watcher13. This guy had been showing up in almost all of my streams for the past few months, always leaving slightly weird comments, but nothing alarming. Something like "I see you or you're not alone, you know?" I saw it as part of the show. I was sure he was just trying to get into the horror atmosphere of the lives. To me, he was just another engaged fan. Over time, though, the comments started to change. I began to notice a pattern. Instead of talking about the game or trying to scare me in a generic way, he started making strange observations. One night, while I was responding to the chat and trying to calm my nerves after a particularly strong scare, he said, "The coffee you made this morning looked good." I was unsettled. How did he know I had coffee that morning? I let out a nervous laugh and moved on, ignoring it. Maybe he just got lucky, a random guess. But his comments started to get even more specific. In another stream, he wrote something like, "That red shirt you left on the couch looks good on you." I had worn a red shirt off camera that day, but I never showed it on stream. I started to feel uncomfortable, but I forced myself to believe it was just a coincidence or someone digging through my social media. Either way, the comment left me uneasy. It was as if he was watching me, but that didn't make sense, right? I was always careful with what I showed on my streams. Still, I tried not to think too much about it. Being a streamer means living surrounded by people who want your attention all the time. It's probably just an obsessed fan trying to get my attention, I thought. You deal with all kinds of people online. I ignored it. I didn't respond, didn't give him what he wanted. I just kept focusing on the game, pretending those comments weren't getting to me. But even though I tried to ignore it, every time Watcher13 showed up, I felt a chill down my spine. What used to be just strange messages now felt like observations from someone who knew more about me than they should. Someone who was much closer than I had ever imagined. Things started to get really bizarre. Watcher 13 wouldn't stop. The comments that used to be just annoying began to take on a chilling tone. One night, during a stream, he wrote, "You should close the bedroom window, you know how the wind can be dangerous at night." I froze. I hadn't mentioned anything about the window on the stream, and the camera wasn't pointing in that direction. The window was indeed open, just as he said. I closed it automatically, without thinking, trying to hide my unease. I continued the stream, but it wouldn't leave my mind. In another stream, he commented, "That old chair in the living room is going to break soon, maybe you should replace it before you fall on it." I had never shown the living room. The chair was there, in a corner that didn't appear on camera. How did he know about it? My mind began to spiral. He must be tracking me somehow, or intruding into my personal life, I thought. But how? I had never shared those details. I was disturbed but still tried to push the thought away. I didn't want to believe that someone could be watching me so closely. Then, the packages started arriving. Small brown envelopes, with no return address, addressed to me in my handwriting. The first one contained something that almost made me laugh nervously, a key I had lost weeks ago. How the hell did he know about that? I thought it was some kind of sick joke. The second package, however, made me tremble. Inside, there was a photo of me sleeping. The picture was taken from the exact angle of the corner of my room, from a spot I would never have noticed. Someone had been in my house. Someone was watching me, silently, while I slept. After that, other items started to appear, a bracelet I thought I had dropped on the street, a notebook I used for personal notes that had disappeared weeks earlier. With each package, my stomach churned. Whoever was doing this knew exactly what was getting to me. Everything I thought I had lost was being returned, like they were playing with me, testing how much I could handle. I could no longer concentrate on the streams. Paranoia began to take over. Every noise I heard in the house made me think there was someone there. I started looking over my shoulder, even during the streams. My eyes scanned the room around me, searching for something out of place, trying to figure out if someone was there, watching me. Watcher 13 continued to appear, now even more frequently. His comments became even more precise. "The cafe on the corner has a great cappuccino, but you seem to prefer the espresso," he once said, shortly after I had passed by the cafe on a day I hadn't shared with anyone. I stopped going out as much. When I did, it was always with a wary eye, trying to spot familiar faces. On my streams, the nervousness was palpable. People in the chat began to notice that something was wrong. "Is everything okay?" they asked. I always gave the same answer, with a forced smile, "Sure, just the game getting to me." But inside, I was falling apart. I knew something was very wrong. Every time I sat in front of the camera, the feeling of being watched only intensified. It wasn't just my followers' eyes watching me play anymore, it was someone out there, or maybe even inside my house. I no longer knew where he was, who he was, or what he wanted. And with each new package, each new message, the idea that the terror was closer than I imagined became impossible to ignore. The live was flowing as usual. I was immersed in a new horror game, the kind that makes you tense at every virtual corner. The chat was lively, goading me to keep going, saying I wouldn't make it to the end. The atmosphere was tense, but it was the kind of tension I was used to. What I didn't know was that the real terror was about to reveal itself. I was in the middle of an intense sequence, trying to escape a creature in the game, when something in the corner of my screen caught my attention. Something that shouldn't have been there. A shadow. It wasn't part of the game. It was something real. My eyes quickly shifted from the monitor to the camera capturing the background of my room. The reflection on the screen showed a still figure, standing in the hallway just behind me. My heart stopped for a second. I tried to process what I was seeing. Is it some strange reflection? A camera glitch? I thought, desperately searching for a logical explanation. I tried to keep playing, my hands sweating, but I could barely concentrate. The chat, completely unaware of what I had just noticed, continued to tease me. "You're quiet, man, scared?" I tried to laugh it off, as if it were just part of the game. "Yeah, just the game," I mumbled, but my voice came out shaky, and I knew they'd notice. I looked back at the monitor. The figure was still there. Closer. My heart was beating so hard I thought the viewers might hear it. It was someone. Not a reflection. Not a camera error. There was a person inside my house. Everything in me screamed to turn around, run, but I was paralyzed by fear. If I make any sudden moves, he'll know I've noticed, I thought. The messages in the chat started to change. "What's going on? Are you okay?" I could only mumble a weak excuse, something about being tired, that the game was getting to me. By this point, I felt like I was losing control. How could I keep my composure knowing someone was there, watching me, in real life? What did he want? I had no way of knowing. I tried to act naturally, but every movement felt forced, as if my muscles were no longer under my control. With a slow, almost imperceptible movement, I shifted the game camera to another angle, trying to see more of the background. There was the figure, now standing by the door of my room, motionless. Panic set in. He was inside my room, just a few meters away. How did he get in? How long had he been there? 1,000 questions raced through my mind, but the biggest one was, what is he going to do now? Every second felt like an eternity. My breathing was uneven, and I knew the chat was noticing. They had no idea what was happening, but knew something was off. I, on the other hand, was on the brink of a breakdown. My eyes flickered between the chat, the game, and the figure's reflection. What to do? If I alerted someone, would he attack? If I ignored it, would it be my end? Finally, I made a decision. I abruptly closed the game, forced a smile, and said something about technical issues. The lie came out awkwardly, but it was the best I could manage. The stream ended with the sound of my heavy breathing filling the silence, and the disconnect button seemed to take forever to respond. When the screen went black and absolute silence filled the room, I stood frozen, unable to move. I knew he was there. The sound of my ragged breathing seemed too loud, as if any movement would trigger something terrible. Slowly, I turned my head, and the room was empty. The hallway, silent. Nothing seemed out of place. But I knew he had been there. And the worst part? I knew he wasn't finished with me yet. When the screen went black and the light ended, the silence that filled my room felt thick, almost palpable. I sat there, frozen in the chair, trying to process what had just happened. My heart was still racing, and every sound from the apartment, the faint rustling of the curtains, the creak of the wooden floor, made me jump. But what haunted me the most was the emptiness around me. Where was he? I stood up slowly, as if any sudden movement could draw the attention of someone hiding in the shadows. My feet barely made a sound on the floor as I walked through the room, checking every corner, every possible hiding spot. The air felt dense with the sense of being watched. He was here, that was an undeniable fact. But how? When? And, more importantly, where was he now? I began to search every corner of the apartment. First, I went to the living room, rummaging through the closet, pulling aside the curtains, checking behind the sofa. Every step I took heightened the sense that I was nearing something terrible. When I approached the kitchen, the first thing I noticed was the slightly open window. I always made sure to close it before starting alive. Always. A shiver ran down my spine. He came in through here. In my mind, everything started to piece together. All those nights I woke up with the feeling of being watched. The objects that would disappear and then mysteriously reappear. The comments from Watcher 13 that knew things I had never shared. He wasn't just watching me through screens, he was inside my life, my home, for far longer than I imagined. I continued the search, forcing myself to inspect every corner of the apartment. It was in my bedroom that I found what truly terrified me. Behind the wardrobe, there was a small space I had never noticed before, a dark alcove, like a passage to the horror unfolding around me. There was a pile of crumpled papers, photos, my photos, photos of me sleeping. Photos of me cooking, sitting in the living room, playing games, from angles only someone inside my apartment could have taken. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just a distant stalker. He had been here, so close to me, for so long. And I had no idea. Among the photos was something even more disturbing, a notebook. When I picked it up, my hands were trembling. The first pages were covered in frantic scribbles, disconnected phrases about watching and protecting. But as I flipped through, the tone shifted, the words becoming more coherent, more threatening. I see you. Always have. You can't escape me. It was at that moment I heard it. A sound. A step behind me. I spun around abruptly, fear paralyzing me, and there he was. Watcher 13. His appearance was so ordinary that for a brief second, I thought I was hallucinating. He was just a man, perhaps a few years older than me, dressed plainly, with an expressionless face. But his eyes, there was something deeply wrong with them. A cold, obsessive gleam. He didn't seem scared or nervous. He was calm, as if he had planned every detail of this moment. You found me, he said, his voice low, almost gentle. I knew you would come to me eventually. I couldn't breathe properly. My mind raced, trying to find an escape, but every possibility led me back to the same place. I was trapped with him. Inside my own home. Why, was all I could manage to say. He took a step forward, his eyes never leaving mine. I know you better than anyone. I've improved your life, protected you. Everything I've done was to keep you safe. But you never thanked me. Never truly noticed me. He smiled, a cold, lifeless smile. But now I'm here. And you can no longer ignore me. Panic surged like a raging sea within me. Every fiber of my being screamed to run, fight, do anything, but my feet felt glued to the floor. He was just a few steps away, so close I could feel his breath. And then everything exploded. With a surge of adrenaline, I grabbed the nearest object, a small desk lamp, and threw it at him with all my strength. The impact made him stagger backward, giving me the time I needed to run. I bolted out of the room, stumbling through the narrow corridors of the apartment, trying to reach the door. My fingers trembled as I fumbled with the lock, hearing his footsteps closing in behind me. With a click, the door opened, and I hurled myself outside, sprinting down the building's corridor, not daring to look back. My heart was pounding, and every fiber of my body was on high alert, expecting him to catch up. I didn't stop until I was on the street, illuminated by streetlights, surrounded by people, finally away from the darkness he had brought into my life. But as I ran away, a terrible certainty struck me. I had escaped for now, but Watcher 13 wasn't done. He would never be done.